Hey there, Lillian Minix here with Timmons Group. I have Andrew Barron with me today, and we're going to chat about some GIS mapping and geospatial services that our team out of like the Mid-Atlantic region provided for the state of North Carolina, particularly Asheville, and the kind of in the wake of Hurricane Helene. It's kind of a sensitive topic, so wanted to give everybody here a heads up before we get too far into it. But Andrew, thank you so much for joining me. We're excited to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. It's a heavy topic, so I appreciate your openness and transparency to chat with me about everything that your team did to support a region that is quite truly a gem of the Appalachian and the Blue Ridge area, and they went through a lot of really traumatic experiences in this amount of time, and I think it's really powerful that your team was able to help support their recovery efforts. Not just recovery, but you guys were in the middle of it, so we're looking forward to talking about it. So I'll introduce myself really quick, and then Andrew, I'll introduce you, and we've got some questions here. I know that you also have some screenshots and some application design to share along the way as well. But I'm Lillian Minix. I'm a marketing communications manager here at Timmons, and if you follow Timmons social media channels, you know that we love a live discussion. We love getting people on the call just to, on the horn to chat with us for a few minutes about whatever is trending at the moment or whatever we want our followers to know. So we picked this topic because we think it's really important to showcase, the work that our team did. And we appreciate everybody being on the call with us today. But Andrew, I'm going to do a brief introduction of you and then ask that you introduce yourself as well. I know that I will be leaving out a ton of things and that you have a fantastically robust background before you came to join us at Timmons, but you've been at the firm since August of 2024, which means that you're about at a 1-year mark.
Yep.
Yeah. How's it been so far?
Love it. Love Timmons.
Yeah. You've had a lot of experiences too in that brief time. So
we'll for sure.
Talk about this in a minute. Yeah. You're a technical analyst on our geospatial services team. Can you give us kind of a brief overview of what exactly your role is and kind of what that means?
Sure. It's a very broad role. I work with a very wide variety of clients. Typically, what I am doing day to day is either doing GIS analysis or I'm building different solutions for clients to support, whether they're DOTs or private clients, anything from California's level of service program to land developers out in North Carolina. I've kind of touched on a whole wide variety of different subject matter since joining Timmons.
Very cool. I love that you have all of those different experiences on the team. It's kind of a great, introduction to the team and kind of everything, the breadth of the work that you all do. And so for those not familiar, geospatial services, can you explain like what it means and wrap it up into a little bow for us?
Sure. So basically, everything has a geospatial component to it, whether people say it does or not. Everything happens in the context of its geography around it. So there's going to be some way to tie in the geographic data of whatever information you're looking at and incorporate that into different analyses or solutions to help make your processes more efficient, to give you tools to do your job, et cetera. So the Geospatial Solutions Department of Timmons is kind of all about wrapping up any geospatial information and making it usable to our clients.
Absolutely. To your point, if it exists in the world, it has a geographic point that we can associate with data or with risk mitigation or with, flood mitigation, anything. And you all take that data and you turn it into actionable items for your clients to make decisions, informed decisions about.
Exactly.
Very cool. It's kind of like if we talk about the cloud and we understand that there's an extra level of the internet that kind of lives up here for us. But imagine that kind of taking it one step further and connecting everything on the ground with something online.
Yeah.
It's kind of how exactly. I did it. Very cool. Very cool. So do you want to give me, again, like brief introduction of, I guess not introduction, but like background of yourself and how you found yourself in this role, how you found Timmons Group?
Sure. So I went to school for GIS, geography. I for anybody who's not familiar, I am working remotely out of the Philadelphia area. So most of my work experience is from the southeastern Pennsylvania region. Basically all through school, I was doing internships with different like civil engineering firms or other GIS-based companies. So I worked for a couple different places after graduating. My job previous to Timmins was working for a small engineering firm out of the Philadelphia area. I was working mostly with PennDOT and the Pennsylvania Turnpike, so I've got a lot of background with DOTs, different transportation agencies, just generally the transportation sector. So I was looking to kind of expand my horizons and work on a different variety of projects, which obviously, as we've already touched on here, I've gotten to do plenty of that at Timmins so far, so wish fulfilled. So as you noted, I've been here for about a year now. So I really was just looking for some more variety, and I've gotten it.
Fantastic. Great background, pulling up the commentary about your transportation, your experience with DOTs and everything. I think that had a big play in what you did in Asheville, is what it sounds like as well. So why don't we get started in that topic? Great to have you. Very excited about our conversation. It's like I said, for those just hopping on with us, we're going to be taking a little bit of a deep dive into the disaster flood response that our geospatial services team provided for the state of North Carolina and the city of Asheville after Hurricane Helene. So that was, again, heavy topic. So just want to make sure that everybody is fully aware before we dive in. I'm going to share my screen, and I do have some notes over here. So I want to make sure I ask you all of the questions that we discussed in advance. So if you see me looking this way, it's checking my notes.
No worries.
Let me pull up some of these photos. Let me see. All right. Okay, so again, I'm going to share my screen, and these are a little graphic, right? Just kind of giving people some context and the understanding of what exactly happened. Let me hide this caption bar so we can see you, Andrew. There we go. So, again, with the context of Asheville was hit really hard, like many other areas in the Appalachian and Blue Ridge corridor on the East Coast. And Hurricane Helene, I think it goes without saying, though, that hurricanes are not typically experienced in this region this hard. So a lot of the infrastructure is not designed to support necessarily the mass flooding. These are towns and cities that are up on mountains. And so it's not super common that they would be, flooded to this extent or experience hurricane weather. It's not something that they're prepared for. So tell us a little bit about this image. I'm going to zoom in a little bit too. This is Asheville.
Yeah. So as you noted, Asheville is basically located right in the heart of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And since the hurricane basically sat over top of the region for like 2 or 3 days and just dumped water on it, all of that water came down from the mountains and basically just filled up essentially a bowl with Asheville right in the center of it. It wiped away roads, bridges, entire sections of the historic district of Asheville, including the Biltmore estate, all got flooded. Sometimes it was up until like the second floor of the building almost. So we're talking about feet upon feet of water here. So I don't know exactly how soon after the immediate hurricane that first picture took place, but I think it was within like the first day or two. You can see the extent of the damage, and this is a good image for what I was referencing in regard to how deep some of this rainwater got. There are 2 rivers that run through Asheville, the Swannanoa River and the French Broad River. And so all of the water from those, obviously, it was already flooding at the early onset of this event, but all that rainwater further exacerbated the flooding to the extent that you can see here.
Right. And so this is the Biltmore.
It's very close to, or maybe like 2 or 3 blocks from the actual Biltmore in this picture. So like if you were to look, I think like to the right of this picture, that's where it would be located.
And, just this, again, we're just giving context to how severe the flooding was and how severe, you and your team, we're going to talk about this a little bit as well, but you and your team were dispatched to be on site to help gather data, collect data, streamline the data, because these, the emergency response, the city of Asheville was very much focused on saving its residents and saving its buildings. And they contracted you all as a third party to help do the things that necessarily, not that they couldn't or that they didn't have time for, but their priority was saving people. And so, you all are providing that expertise and that data moving forward to help get them through the main severity. This is just wild. And I imagine with your background in transportation, that it's hard to look at, right?
Yeah, I mean, the extent of some of the damages was just insane. And I didn't even get to see a lot of it because I was basically contained to just the downtown area while I was deployed. But this was along closer to some of the mountains, which caused, there was tons of landslides in addition to the flooding. So I think it was kind of a combination of both in this case as to how this road basically only partially exists at this point.
Sure. And then we have another road image here. This was a bridge that kind of gave out. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now because I want to bring us back really quick to the impetus for the conversation. And then we'll pull up the other three, we have three other screenshots of applications that you pulled together. So again, impetus for the discussion is that you all needed to be on site physically. Your team was deployed. You were in Asheville for 2.5 weeks to help the city streamline their data and gather data that they needed to make actionable decisions to save, to save their infrastructure and to make sure that residents were safe and to save buildings. So when you have all of that data, again, I'm going to share my screen in a minute with these screenshots of the apps, but what are you looking for with the data? Like if you're on site in Asheville and you were in one of those scenarios, what is it that your takeaway?
Well, I guess it really depends on what task we're supporting at the time. I think the first two screenshots that you'll show momentarily, one of our first tasks that we were primarily asked to focus on was to help them identify isolated communities. And to do that, we utilized basically a comparison GIS tool to look at aerial imagery from before and after the hurricane had hit. That way we could identify areas where trees had gone down, bridges or roads were washed away, landslides had completely destroyed entire neighborhoods. Using that information, we could help the city determine so-and-so amount of houses in this area are isolated from what we can see using aerial imagery. You should send response teams out to this location. There were other instances where we were tasked to look at all of the different drone deployments. So where they had previously done recon, where they should target new reconnaissance efforts. So we used the drone points, we used population density, we used other factors such as how much cloud was in the aerial imagery that was collected. And then we'll get to it, I guess, later, but a lot of what I was looking at in particular was transportation outages so that we could help with recovery efforts once a lot of the initial rescue was over with.
Sure.
So it really depended day to day. Sometimes we would just be getting ad hoc requests from departments we typically weren't assisting to put together maps for them to help the population of Asheville either locate services or navigate with the road outages.
Yeah. So I'll go ahead and share my screen then, because it sounds like you were talking about this aerial map. And I said I was going to give us a break. And then I thought I should probably just go ahead and pull this up. So this is the map that you were talking about where you can kind of slide back and forth.
Correct.
Tell us about what's going on here.
So on the left side of this experience builder, this custom experience builder, we were seeing imagery from before the Hurricane Helene impacts. The right side of the screen is imagery from after the fact. So the reason why it looks very haphazard almost, or patchwork with all of the different aerial texturing, that's because we were getting aerial imagery in from dozens of different sources. We had drone teams who were basically just community members who had drones or had done this for other emergencies around the local area. We had Space Force on site as well. We had the Air Force, both working together to get imagery. So a lot of this was sort of built by some of the local Asheville like colleges or the Buncombe County GIS department. And we helped support some changes to it to optimize the experience for pinpointing some of the geographic features that we were looking to highlight, such as like the tree downages, road outages, bridge outages, the isolated communities. So basically, we would be assigned to a quadrant in here. Basically, we had a grid pattern that you could turn on within this application. So I might be assigned to like grid cell 150. I would zoom in on that and basically just kind of go very slowly and compare between the pre and the post imagery and say, okay, it looks like there used to be a road here. There isn't one anymore. Let me investigate this further. I would drop a pin, but then I would also look at the larger context and say, well, this road was the only road into this neighborhood, and now this road doesn't exist. So we should probably send a rescue team out there to make sure that everybody got out of there before the flooding occurred or before the landslide occurred, stuff like that.
Wow. And so these are those layers up on the right side that you were talking about, the grid that you can turn on, or the forest mask or the building masks.
Yep. And it's hidden up at the top, but the damage points, that's really what we were collecting on here. So myself, the team, some of the other GIS staff from the county, we were all contributing to this. This was a very slow process. And over time, the priorities kind of changed from the initial rescue to recovery. So we could kind of go through it with a fine-tooth comb, like maybe a week or so after we got there, and say, before we were kind of trying to make sure we identified any isolated areas, any homes that were impacted by this. Later on, we could say, all right, the rescue phase is over. We can now look into identifying specific like infrastructure that's damaged. So this tool was evolving over the course of the 2.5 weeks that I was there.
Right. And again, your point about you're kind of stitching all of this data together, and it sounds like you all, really worked very diligently at getting the right data and making sure it was as accurate as possible to work from. Whoops.
Yeah, well, with the imagery especially, we almost, between what I had heard from the county and some of the drone teams, we almost had too much data to kind of work with. It almost got too confusing and too much time was being spent processing the imagery data. After a certain point, once the emergency's over, there's only so much new imagery is going to be able to tell you. So it's kind of good to stick to one source of truth at a certain point and work off of that. That way, we're not consulting conflicting aerial imagery or other data.
Sure. Wow. So you want to move on to the next one. And this is, I think similar. I'm not quite sure I understand the full dashboard and what it's capable of. Do you want to tell us about it?
Yeah. So the map that we were pinpointing damage points on in the previous screenshot that you were showing, all the data that was collected there is essentially feeding what's visible on this dashboard here. We've removed the aerial imagery to make it more, visually comprehensible. So all of the different color codes that you can see down in that pie chart in the bottom right, they correspond with a specific damage type that we had been mapping. So like the dark red might have been down trees or landslides. The various blues might have been damage or flood damage to a house, flood damage to like a business, or different infrastructure outages might have been like yellow or orange. I don't remember the color coding. I can't really read it on here now, but
it's a little small.
Yeah. But basically you can see from this map and all the aerial imagery analysis we did, where you can kind of see the density of the damages that occurred. And a lot of these were obviously in more urbanized areas because there's more property, more people to be impacted by this. But we did also capture a lot of the damages up in the more rural areas where it's mostly just forest, because it's good to have an idea of where all those landslides were occurring, to have a good idea, the slope here is kind of dangerous. Have that on the back, have that on backhand for later during future analyses or other preparations they need to do for future emergencies.
Absolutely. And, you know, to your point too, this is much more rural area, but people still live here. So,
Yeah.
you know, you're, you know, focused, there's a heavy focus in the like more urban areas because it's very dense. But I mean, you also were focusing elsewhere just to make sure if there's someone that's up on the mountain, they still have access to the roads that they need and access to emergency care.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of how the grid assignments were working. So all of us, we got assigned batches upon batches of square mile grids to review. And so I think we covered every square mile of Buncombe County around Asheville to make sure that no rural areas kind of went overlooked.
Yeah, spectacular. It sounds like you all were very thoughtful in your approach. And I know that this next piece is a very thoughtful approach as well. These are screenshots taken from a phone, right? So do you want to give us a little bit of an idea of what's going on here?
Sure. So what this is a configured Survey 123, which I had put together for the National Guard and for emergency management or county staff to utilize basically on site visit missions to confirm infrastructure outages. This was mostly to be used for confirming whether a road or a bridge was usable or not. When I first got on site, literally the very first day that I was on the job, I got handed a Word document with road outages that were kind of just written out by the various fire departments of Asheville, or Buncombe County, I should say. And first of all, a lot of the maps I had did not have these roads on them because they were small sort of private roads or similar, and the county didn't have all of them in their own database. So I couldn't really map these well. So I consulted some of the local planners and we got all the data together and I put together a rough map using basic symbology, green being the road was unimpacted, red being that the road was out, and orange being like limited impacts or like maybe a lane was out, but it was still usable in some extent. So over the next week and a half, 2 weeks, our process for getting data from first responders kind of evolved to this in-person approach as they were sending field teams out. They would have a copy of that symbolized map that I put together. They would utilize this application here, basically put their name, the responder type, whether they were like the National Guard or fire department, police department. They would go on to a downloaded copy of this map. All of this was offline because basically most of the cellular service in Asheville and Buncombe County was out at this point, along with most of the other utilities.
Wow.
They would then input the street name if they could find it along the road. And then they would say, basically they would confirm whether the road or bridge was out or whether the status should be updated to say unaffected, damaged, weight restrictions, or it was impassable altogether. And basically they would then have to add one, 2, or 3 photos. And then on the back end, I was tasked with basically confirming the data that was sent in by them. So every night when they would get back from their missions at like 9, 10 o'clock, I would then spend the next like 2 or 3 hours up into the early hours of the next day, making sure that all the roads were properly symbolized based on the latest data. That way we didn't have people continuously going back and saying, I don't know why this road's showing red, really it should be green, or vice versa. So we had a dashboard that this was linked to as well, so that everybody in basically the headquarters of the Emergency Operations Center could say, yesterday we had 100 roads classified as out. Today we only have like 95, and progressively we could see that number coming down. Sometimes it would actually go up as the field operations confirmed there was actually more outages than we initially thought, which was interesting. So it was kind of like in flux constantly, just like the imagery analysis, it was constantly evolving with the data we were getting.
Right. And so this is an incredibly thoughtful way for, you know, the people. So your end client was the North Carolina Department of Public Safety.
Yeah.
Right, for the contract. And so this is essentially an extension of them and their capabilities. And so, you know, you're really providing people with a hands-on interactive tool that is ease of access and that is just user friendly, right? Like the UI UX design is really nice. It's streamlined. When there's so much going on, you want to, be able to ask these people, hey, we need your help doing this thing. Here's an easy way to do it. Because, it's hard to ask someone for an extra hand to do something like this and make the platform difficult for them to work with. Like, we don't want that, right?
Yeah, when I was tasked with doing this, the guy basically said, I've got a lot of people on my team who are not super tech savvy, or they're going to be busy doing a lot of other things while also collecting this data. We need to make this basically as simple as possible. So that was kind of my approach here, keeping it limited to like really 5 questions. Some of the information would be cached from their previous responses, so they wouldn't have to type in their name every time. It wouldn't have to type in their responder type. So it just basically streamlined the process for them.
The cache is really nice, and that's one of those things that might not register with you, and unless you're in this situation and you think, man, every single time I fill this out, I got to put in.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, very thoughtful, Andrew. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and this has been such a great conversation that we're kind of we're getting up there in the minutes. It's about 25 minutes now, so I want to pull us back in and thank you for walking through everything with me. Again, we were chatting about the kind of this, I guess, like the disaster recovery and response that you were working with for the city of, I guess it was Buncombe County is how I'm going to say it, based on your commentary, and then the North Carolina Department of Public Safety to help disaster response during Hurricane Helene. And that was truly unexpected and very difficult for the region. And I'm really glad that you and the Timmins Group team were able to work with your clients in helping some of these public safety organizations keep their data streamlined and accessible during the time.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the circumstances were terrible, but the work I got to do down there was incredibly rewarding. It was lovely working with everybody at the Buncombe County Emergency Operations Center, and the different variety of things I got to do was super interesting as well.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an experience you'll be able to take with you for a very long time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Andrew, thank you so much. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to touch on before we go?
No, I don't think so. I think I said this in a previous conversation, maybe with Nathan, but in my opinion, this is really like kind of the epitome of what GIS is made for. There are so many different use cases in an emergency management situation like this, whether it's with like the drone and aerial imagery and conducting analyses on this, or collecting data using custom or configured solutions. So many components of GIS can be utilized in emergency management, and it's going to a good cause, obviously. So I think this, as you said, will be an experience I'll take with me really for the rest of my life, and probably will be one of the highlights of my career, I'd say.
Absolutely. Well, Andrew, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And if you're following along on LinkedIn or any one of our channels, come back and touch base, because I'm going to update the description, the caption here for the video, and tag Andrew so that you can find him online if you want. If you're interested in working with our GIS or geospatial services teams, give us a shout at gis@timmins.com. All right. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.